Welcome back to the Caring Conference. Taylor is our next presenter, and she's going to talk to us about the person she has become. Take it away, Taylor.
Denise, I actually can't hear you if, I don't know, just me.
Yeah, can everybody hear me?
Now I can.
Okay, yeah, go ahead, Taylor, you're set.
Okay. So good morning, everybody. My name is Taylor Calderone. I'm a writer focusing on issues of motherhood, caregiving, and the family. I live in New Jersey with my husband and 2 kids. I have an 8-year-old girl and a 6-year-old boy. Today, we're going to be talking about what happens when our identities, both the losses and the gains that we may experience as we go through our caregiving journey. I'm sorry, is that not? Did we just lose the screen share? There we go. Am I back?
Not yet. Go ahead and share your screen.
There we go. Did that go?
Yep, you're good.
Sorry about that. So just a quick housekeeping note, the things that you need today, just a piece of paper and a pen, we'll use them later on in the presentation. And then just if you have any questions as you've been doing, just put them in the chat throughout. And at the end, hopefully during some self-reflection, I'll be able to answer those questions. So I wanted to acknowledge both sides of our audience today. I know we have some family caregivers and we have some professional caregivers. And I kind of always hesitate using those labels. It makes it sound as if the family caregivers aren't professional, which of course is not the case. You're the ones there oftentimes 24/7 caring. You're involved in some transforming identities in a different way. I hope that I can give you ways to embrace rather than fight the changes. And I'm going to be completely honest in sharing my story that I fought them. I did not embrace them. And I'm going to provide you with some analogies that I hope will offer some concrete ways to re-examine our own identities as we go through our caregiving experience. And that maybe even in moments of difficulty, you'll be able to recall an analogy that may help recenter you in that moment. And we're going to talk about paradox and conflicting feelings, that in the center of all the changes, that there is actually no change at all, and kind of being comfortable with that. For professional caregivers, I hope that we can gain an insight into what the family caregiver experience may be like. And well, I'm sure you've thought a lot about that, just to give you a chance to understand more deeply the turmoil that may be going on inside them as they stand beside your patient, because I, think that the exterior is probably pretty well put together, but that's not always how we feel underneath. And to me, the best providers were really the ones who understood that both my parents and I were part of the health journey. And they didn't speak to just me as if my parents weren't there at all. And they didn't speak to just my parents as if I wasn't a big part of this. And so, like I said, we're going to talk about some conflicting feelings. I think that the journey of caregiving is fraught with a lot of conflicting feelings. And I think that that can be true of our stories too. It took me a really long time to realize that these conflicting feelings and the fact that they coexist is okay. So later on, we're going to discuss an analogy that I hope helps us really visualize this coexistence and not fight it quite so much. So for me, this is a story of how my identity at once transformed and a story of how it didn't change at all. Not for me a story of a lesson I embraced, but a lesson I fought. And not a story of what I knew, but a story of what I wish I knew. And my hope in sharing today is to be honest about the things that I wish I had better understood while I was going through it. And so I did just want to do a quick note that the barriers of language, I think a lot of times when we are in this experience, people will try to meet us where we're at and compare to what's going on. And I know when I felt that both with caregiving, but also with the grief experience, that I really pushed back a lot about that. So while we share the journey of caregiving, which creates a ready-made bond between strangers, right? Between me on this side of the screen and all of you on this side of the screen. I think our individual experiences can be very different. So, I don't mean to compare my situation to yours. I think that despite the differences of our individual circumstances, we can learn from each other. And if we're open to another story without feeling the need to make these comparisons, I think that we can learn from it. And so, in order to gain something from my story, I think you need to know the details. So these are the details. These photos here, these are my parents, and then the three of us together around Christmas time at our home. I was an only child, so I was very close with my parents. My identity was very much wrapped up in being a daughter and being, an only child. When I got pregnant with my first, and actually the day I found out I was pregnant, my mom went to the hospital for the first time with symptoms that would eventually end up being a terminal cancer diagnosis. And she was given 6 months to live. So I became grief stricken, as I'm sure others have experienced, long before the actual death. And I think that can happen with dementia, it can happen with Alzheimer's, that we deal with this anticipatory grief. So for me, while I was navigating death, and then this new life of my children, I was also trying to figure out, how to operate under the weight of this anticipatory grief. So my parents lived a couple hours away at that point. Towards the end of her illness, they moved around the corner from me so that I could help, on a daily basis, be involved in her care, and that she could spend the last months of her life with my daughter, her namesake. And so she eventually entered into hospice for what we thought was going to be a week, and turned out to be 6. My dad and I went there every day in order to be with her. When she passed away, my dad's own health problems started. I became pregnant with my second, and, things sort of snowballed from there. So, as dad's health problems progressed and I had 2 very young children at home, it was very much that sandwich generation that you hear people talk about. But throughout this journey, I think the transformation there, I experienced this transformation of my own identity, only child, daughter. And then all of a sudden, within a couple years, I was wife, I was mother, I was nurse, I was caregiver, and all these things. And I had to try to figure out how to navigate all of that. Sorry, my computer's not quite keeping up with me. There we go. So as you listen today, I hope that you can fill in the details of your own identity transformation as you listen to my story. So slot in the details of yours as they apply. Not all pieces might. And then we'll have some time at the end for some self-reflection. So I think the first aspect that I want to talk about is losing identity. And to me, it's really a multi-layered loss that we can experience. So I was the child of my parent. And, for many of us, as we care for our parents, no matter what age we're at, you sort of go through this experience of becoming a parent of your parent. And for me, I hadn't figured out yet how to be a parent to my own kids. And here I was trying to figure out how to be a parent to my parent. And I don't mean that in a derogatory way, but just in a very practical, I became a driver, I became a problem solver, I became the advice giver, the schedule keeper, all of that. And then as my father's health problems increased, I really started to feel my own daughterhood slip away. The second layer that can come with this is when the person you're caring for no longer knows you. And this goes back to the anticipatory grief I was talking about. But the first time my mom looked at me and asked how my mom was, I think that can really make you question your own identity when the person you love and you're caring for doesn't recognize you as the person you are, and how that affects you. And then you're also watching your loved one lose their identity. And I think it's so important to see the loved one's identity outside of their illness. And that's an easier thing, I think, for family caregivers than for professional caregivers. I have a picture of my mom there because when my mom was in hospice, she was in a bed for 6 weeks in a coma, just hooked up to a morphine drip. She had lost so much weight, but her face had that, the puffiness still, no hair, and she just didn't look anything like her. And my dad brought in a picture of her and put it on the nightstand next to her bed. And every nurse and doctor who came in, he talked about her and he said, please look at this picture. This is the person you're treating. She had this whole life, and they listened, and it was wonderful. And it just made such a difference that, we felt like they were treating, his wife and my mother. And then the last layer of this is if you are lucky enough that you have somebody else in the care circle with you. So for my mother, it was both my dad and I, you're mourning the potential loss or the actual loss of the same person. But at the same time, that person is different to each of you. So for me, my dad, for us, my dad, of course, was losing his life partner, his wife. And for me, I was losing my mom and my role model. Those are two very different people in our lives, even though it was actually the same person. Then we're losing identities, we're gaining identities. For me, I was becoming a wife and a mother. And as a daughter, I think I just always assumed that at this time in my life, I was going to have my parents there next to me to help me figure this out. And I really took that for granted. And when suddenly that was ripped away from me, I really struggled. And there were two aspects of this for me, both the practical, but also the emotional. So the practical, all the tasks that I just never, I'll be honest, took time to learn because I figured my mom was going to be there to help me through it. How to burp a baby, how to deal with toddler tantrums, sleep regression, how to iron a dress shirt, cook a Thanksgiving turkey, all these things that I was like, oh yeah, later. And all of a sudden later was now, and she couldn't. But even more important than that, just the emotional support and guidance, navigating decisions of motherhood, creating a marriage, and how all of that worked and how it affected me, and, to suddenly not have any of that. So I really was struggling with, how do I take on these new roles? How do I gain these new identities while also losing so much? And so for you, is it a new relationship? Is it a new job? What identities are you gaining as you're going through your caregiving experience? So we're going to start with an analogy. I know this seems trite, but just bear with me. So of course, tornado, this seems, kind of like a no-brainer. Yes, all of us have probably felt this way. Not that every day is this way, but some days I think really you can feel this, and just sort of the overall emotional whirlwind that you're going through. So, for me, I felt like I was in survival mode for so many years. And it was really just about getting to the next day. So I made reference to professional caregivers earlier, and just sort of looking at what is going on underneath the surface of what I'm sure is a very composed exterior. This is what's going on underneath the surface. For a lot of us, it feels very chaotic. We're struggling with uncertainty. We're overwhelmed. There's a lack of control. And we're struggling, right? So for me, I was really, I think, fighting the transformation that I was being asked to make. I had envisioned this time in my life to be a certain way. And when what I envisioned and the reality just didn't match at all, I will be completely honest. I was angry, I was bitter, I was jealous, and I was really struggling. And I think, if you're caring for a spouse and you had this idea of what, your marriage may be, or, your later years, and suddenly none of that gets to happen, struggling with those two things can be really difficult. And I think I wasted a lot of emotional energy fighting the transformation, but also mourning this loss of the future. So I want to move on now with this tornado analogy. And at the center of a tornado, everything is very still. And this is the part that I think I didn't realize until after my caregiving experience had ended, but I wish I had known it during. And I think it would have made such a difference for me. So I'm hoping to pass on some insight to those who may still be in it, as we say. And this, to be honest, thinking about it this way has transformed my own motherhood and the way that I look at that. So for me, there were two aspects of this unchanged identity. There was the practical again and the emotional. When my father died, there's a lot of logistics and I was the only one to deal with it. And I found myself, like, despite being so scared about losing my daughterhood and suddenly really I was an orphan, every question I had to answer as dealing with all these logistics was, I'm his daughter. And so that, like, in a lot of ways helped reconfirm for me that, like, no, none of that went away. I am his daughter, present tense, I am his daughter. But there was something more that I realized, that even in his death, it did not take away that self-identification as his daughter. So I just would like to think of, to help you think about, like, as the chaos is happening, and again, it's not an everyday thing, but, we can feel that way a lot as the turmoil is happening, that our identities remain at the center unchanged. And I finally realized it was what I learned as my parents' daughter, not the things I never had time to learn, that helped me make the transformation possible and provided the stability to help my identity really remain the same. So we're going to do just a little bit of self-reflection. I'm just keeping an eye on the time here. I hope that the discussion so far, may have helped you transform some of your emotions that are in that tornado. But for this reflection, let's recenter ourselves. And just a quick reminder, if you have any questions, put them in the chat. And while everybody is doing this exercise, I'll take a look at the chat. So we're going to recenter ourselves. We're going to come out of that tornado. And in the center of this piece of paper, I want you to draw a circle. And then on the, coming out from that circle, we're going to make a sun. So I want you to draw some rays and just leave enough room. You're going to write on each of these rays. So I did 6. It's up to you, however many you want to do. In the center of the circle, I want you to write your identity in relation to the person you're caring for. So are you the wife, husband, son, daughter, mother, father? Who are you? So our identities, the identities of those we're caring for, we're enduring these gains, these losses, things are changing. But I want for this exercise to focus on why at the center of this swirling tornado, we can still remain the same. And that's because of who we are at core and how we're caring for our loved ones. So on each of those lines or rays, I want you to choose adjectives, phrases, whatever you want to do. This is just for you, that would describe your identity as seen by an outsider. And this part's so important. We are our biggest critics, right? So we can all say, I can name 100 times I lost patience, I was frustrated, I didn't do what I should have done. None of that. I want you to pretend that somebody is looking in the window at you and your loved one and describing what they see. How would that person see you? And that's what I want you to think about. So just take, about a minute or two. I'm going to take a look at the chat real quick, and then we'll all come back.
And I just want to mention in the chat room, we've also been using the words that identify who we are right now. And those words have been really powerful. And it's been interesting to think about how the words that we use to identify ourselves broaden who we are. It's been really powerful.
Absolutely. I'm looking at all these words. I love, protector, advocate, provider, teacher, nurse, absolutely. And, somebody just said, appreciating yourself. And I think that is really important. I think that we can forget to do that in a lot of these situations.
And I love the grace that we give ourselves when we step back and think, okay, when another sees what I do, how would they describe it? And it would be a much gentler description of what we do than we inside think about ourselves. And I love that in terms of the gift we can give ourselves to really see who we are and all that we do in such a caring way.
I think that's true. I found a lot that the way I saw myself and the way that other people saw me, it helped me be a little bit more forgiving of myself, because I focused a lot on the ways that, I wasn't there, or I lost my patience, because we do, right? We're exhausted. And so I think it was really important to kind of take a moment to see what other people see. I think we forget to do that sometimes.
Yeah, you've got just about 3 minutes. So if you want to
Yep.
wrap it up for
Perfect.
us.
So we're gonna wrap up. So I talked a lot about analogies, and my hope with sharing these analogies with you is just that, when you're in it, I hope that you'll be able to look back at some of these things and just thinking about it in a different way. Even if you're in the tornado, and you can't see how any part of the center is still, just to help you come out of that for a second, and provide the hope that, there is something greater. And for me, I'll be honest, even though my parents have both passed away, I'm still going through the process. And part of it, I think, is accepting that it is a process. So I hope this is giving you a way to reconcile your own changing identities and conflicting emotions, and offer some encouragement that what you're doing is such a great gift. And so as part of that gift, I wanted to say that, even on the most difficult of days, I think our identities represent the light in our loved one's life. And that's that sun that I just had you draw. And all those adjectives, all those phrases, those are the rays that we illuminate our loved one's life, even when our identity is forgotten or taken for granted, because that happens too, right? Our loved one is also frustrated and losing patience. They may not even know who we are anymore, but they can still, all those things that we do, all those adjectives, they can still feel the warmth of those rays. So I hope that if you find yourself in the center of that tornado, you can have faith in the warmth of these sun's rays and what you're doing, that it really is such a great gift. So in this, in this last moment, I hope to leave you with this picture a little bit more calm, not the tornado. And please don't hesitate to stay in touch. Like I said, my name is Taylor Calderone. I'm a writer on issues involving family, caregiving, and motherhood. The best way to reach me directly, and please feel free to contact me, is through Twitter. I do have my DMs open, and I will write back, I promise. I'm also on LinkedIn, and I see that the links are going out in the chat. So thank you so much. You can contact me on there too. So thank you, Denise, so much for having me today. Thank you, everybody, for attending. I really appreciate it.
Thank you, Taylor. That was awesome. That was awesome. Okay, I'm going to stop the recording and we're going to get ready